What up YouTube? This video is taken on Groundhog's Day, February 2nd, 2023. Time was 7:55 a.m. And this is going to be a dive and dash video of the Orlando Freefall Drop Tower. Now this isn't my first attempt at diving the drop tower. I originally wanted to dive it before it opened back in December 2021, back when I was doing Packsember. It wasn't open at that point, but it was all lit up, so I had the idea to come out at night and dive it at night. So I came out past midnight, but when I showed up, the area was still really busy. What I ended up doing was flying around the Orlando Eye, which is a 400-foot Ferris wheel. That video is up here on YouTube. But the Freefall Tower opened up later that month, December 28, 2021. It stands at 430 feet tall and has a 400-foot drop and reaches speeds of 75 miles an hour. It was the tallest drop tower in the world. I didn't really think about going back and trying to dive it again, but I wanted to go back and ride it, but I didn't get that chance because unfortunately on March 24, 2022, there was a fatality. A 14-year-old boy fell to his death from the ride. Since then, the tower has been closed, and they recently announced that they were going to remove it. At the time I'm filming this voiceover for this video, the tower is currently being disassembled. Now, after the accident, an investigation by Quest Engineering, which was hired on the behalf of the Florida Department of Agriculture, came to the conclusion that the operator of the tower modified the ride in a way which allowed the accident to happen. A lot of people seem to not understand what operator means in this case. It doesn't mean the actual ride attendants or ride operators who were operating the ride that night. It's talking about the company that actually owns the ride, which is called the Slingshot Group. The ride has proximity sensors that tells the ride computer that the restraints are in the down position. The seat that the victim rode had the sensor adjusted to allow the closed position to read much more open than the rest of the seats. This allowed a gap between the seat and the restraint to be large enough for the victim to slide out when the gondola started slowing down at the bottom of the drop. I'll put up some photos from the accident report, but you can see the markings on the sensor plate that the sensor was at one time in the right position. The accusation is that the Slingshot Group purposely changed the adjustments on seats 1 and 2 to allow larger riders to ride, and that the ride attendants were told to put larger riders in these seats. I believe the Slingshot Group is appealing the findings, disputing this accusation, but I was surprised to see that no torque stripe was used on the bolts to make sure the sensor never shifted. A lot of people are blaming the manufacturer for not putting seatbelts on the ride. It is true that if there was seatbelts, the accident probably wouldn't have happened, and the seatbelts could have been set up to prevent a rider that was too large from being able to ride. Just like on B&M coasters, if the harness doesn't get the full 3 clicks, the seatbelt can't physically buckle. But the restraint was actually adequate without needing a seatbelt. It was set up with 2 redundant hydraulic actuators, making it fail-safe. My criticism of the manufacturer is that they made the sensor bracket adjustable. I don't really see the need for the sensor bracket to be adjustable, since I think any inconsistencies with every seat will be trivial. The accident report showed that between all the non-affected seats, there were deviations in the gap of up to 1.5 inches. So it seems that they weren't too concerned about consistency in the first place. Also, since the sensor was close to the axis of rotation, a little adjustment on the sensor bracket made a big adjustment in the gap of the restraint. It's a bit of odd design, as the sensor was set up to have dual purposes. It was used to make sure the seats were in a level position, since the seats had the ability to tilt, and it was also used to make sure the harness was closed enough. Going through the ride manual I found online, I didn't see anywhere where it said how to properly adjust the sensor, but on the daily checklist it was listed to check the mount and function of the sensor. The victim was over 6 feet tall and weighed 383 pounds. At the time of opening, the slingshot group was quoted saying that there was no weight limit, but the manual for the ride stated the weight limit was 130 kilograms, or about 286 pounds. The manual also said to check to make sure that the passenger fits within the contours of the seat and that the bracket fits properly. If not so, to not let them ride. The accident report also stated that a force of 250 pounds on the harness would cause the gap between the seat and the restraint to increase by 3 inches. It seems the padding used for the seats and the restraints had a bit of give to them. The way that these restraints work is that there's a hydraulic actuator connected to the restraint and that is valved off to prevent the actuator from moving. There is a fail point in this in that if the piston seal was compromised on the hydraulic actuator, force could cause the fluid to travel from one side of the actuator to the other, allowing the actuator to move when it's locked. That's why they use 2 actuators per seat for redundancy. The manufacturer also supplied a test device that is used to test the seats every 15 days. The device had a spring that would push up on the restraint, and the computer would open one of the actuators, causing only one actuator to remain closed. After 5 minutes of the spring pushing up against the restraint, the person performing this test would check a gauge to make sure the amount the restraint moved was within a limit. This would ensure that the piston seal wasn't compromised. I thought that this was interesting. I'm always interested in how amusement rides work. I know hindsight is 20/20, but it does seem like someone should have foreseen that making a modification like that could be deadly. That is, if they purposely moved the sensor like the narrative is being stated. But still, if the sensor shifted on its own, a little torque stripe on the bracket would have allowed this to be caught easily on the daily inspection. Or even taking the time to slowly lower the harness so the indicator light for a locked restraint would come on. This would have made apparent that the seat had the ability to have a larger gap. Hopefully lessons learned from this accident will help prevent another similar thing from happening. That area on International Drive had other unfortunate circumstances as well. The day I dove the tower, the Orlando Eye, or what is now known as the Wheel at Icon Park, was closed from an accident as well. On New Year's Eve, a motor caught fire, causing the power to go out. The fire department had to rescue riders from the wheel. While there's not a lot of information about this, as an electrician myself, I would have to say a lot has to go wrong in order for something like that to happen. Big motors like that have at least a thermal switch that would have been used to alert that the motor was overheating. And I would assume a motor that big and a project as big as the Eye would have had temperature sensors as well, and the VFD controlling the motor should have had a current limit set to prevent excess currents enough that would have caused the fire. But who knows? I'm just saying that there is things in place to prevent something like that from happening. The wheel is operated from a different company than the drop tower, but it has since reopened. Also back in September 2020, the StarFlyer, which is operated from the Slingshot group as well, also had a fatality when one of the maintenance workers died from a fall while they were doing a daily inspection. While all 3 events seem to be unrelated, it's quite unusual that they all happened in the same area. I'm glad I was able to dive the tower with my drone before it was taken down. I got quite an adrenaline rush from it. I would say it was just as intense as the first time I skydived. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.